There doesn't appear to be any tariff reprieve for Canada. President Trump says the country's decision to recognize a Palestinian state in September will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal without a deal. The tariffs on some Canadian goods will rise to 35%. The ability to impose tariffs was the subject today of an appeals court hearing. Judges are hearing arguments over whether he overstepped a law. It's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It's the law that allows the president to respond to an unusual, extraordinary threat, i.e. the tariff threat. The judges seem sceptical, with one judge noting that trade deficits have existed for decades. Patrick Childress is with me, the former Assistant General Counsel for the Office of USTR. Without getting into the legal weeds of this, it was unusual that the basically, I mean, the president's used this act to try and get his tariffs through as an emergency, but it's an interesting strategy which may well pull the whole thing apart.
Right. Well, first of all, great to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. And, what I'm really looking at here is not just what the appellate courts are going to do, but I think ultimately this ends up with the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court rules against the administration's position and finds that the IEPA statute does not authorize tariffs, then the question becomes, what does the administration do next? And I do think there's alternative statutory authority that the administration would look to in order to put in place the same or similar tariffs in the event that the appellate courts ultimately do strike down the administration's use of IEPA here.
Right, but the difference, of course, being, and again, I don't want to get into the legal weeds, if he hadn't used IEPA, he would have had to go through a Section 232 section, and it would have taken weeks, months to get to be able to put the tariffs on. He would not have been able to do it in quite the same way.
Right. It is true that I think one of the things that's attractive to the administration is the flexibility and speed with which it can apply tariffs under IEPA. Now, you're correct that other statutory authorities like Section 301 and Section 232 do require more process and time and public input before tariffs can be put in place based on those authorities.
The one thing, let's just talk about the wider issue here. And what I'm keen on is, how far do you think these tariffs, once introduced, along with the framework stuff, which is very strange, actually will alter the US's trade relationship? And by that I mean, if the goal is to get manufacturing to lower the deficit, does it do that over time?
I think it's one piece of the solution. The administration's been very clear that its goal is to bring back manufacturing into the United States, lower trade deficits, and create jobs here in the United States. And I think tariffs are one tool that can help get you there. I do not think that necessarily they're going to be enough on their own. I think to really spur domestic manufacturing, you need to look not just at the stick approach, i.e. the tariffs, but also you need to look at introducing some sort of carrot, whether that's tax incentives or grants for manufacturing here in the United States. I think that's the way you, in sort of a long-term, concrete way, can bolster the domestic manufacturing sector, especially in some of these industries. I'm thinking pharmaceuticals, for instance, where we know that to bring back manufacturing, it's going to take several years and many millions of dollars.
Can I ask you though, the trade deals have all got some framework relation to them. Several hundred billion of energy, 650 billion. The president will be given a fund of XYZ, but they are so uncertain. No one, you know better than anyone the significance of a trade deal. It's dotting I's, crossing T's, putting a corset around it, and making sure there's no wiggle room. From what I've seen on these frameworks, they're basically Swiss cheese.
Well, I will say that there are certainly a lot of additional negotiations to be had. And it's going to take time for the negotiators, principally at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, which is where I used to work, to hammer out the details of these agreements. So I think that's going to be a process that's going to take months at a minimum, perhaps even years, until we get fully fleshed out trade agreements that implement these framework agreements that we've seen so far.
Which will put us back to where we started. I'm very grateful to you, sir. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll talk more, obviously, as this keeps going.